Well, welcome everyone to the first of the 2021-2022 professional development sessions that are being offered online by the Center of Excellence for Behavior Management. The Center of Excellence for Behavior Management is a support to the 10 English school boards of Quebec. Myself, along with my two coordinators, Catherine Cora and Martine Demers, provide support to the English school boards, helping them with children who have challenges with their behavior. I am a school psychologist. I have worked in the field for many, many years, and bring, I think, a way of looking at children that hopefully is helpful to you. I know that many of you have already attended our sessions. We use a developmental approach and a trauma-sensitive approach, attachment-friendly approach when working with children. And this is a bit different than some of the other ways of intervening and understanding children that are brought to you by other people. And it's certainly up to you to decide what works for you, what resonates with you. And so I will be presenting for about 50 minutes and leave about 10 minutes for questions. So if you'd like to put them into the chat for me, that would be helpful. And I'll do my best to answer them. So without further ado, let me just go and find my PowerPoint and get myself organized here. There we go. So our session today is on anxiety, alarm, and attention problems, how to help children focus and attend. And I know that some of you are working at high school as well. I tend to use the word children because I really want to respect the fact that even our high school students are in the process of development, and we need to understand them from that perspective as well, from their youth. The approach that I use is the Neufeld developmental paradigm. It's kind of the anchor, and it is what has helped me to make the most sense of children. With the experience that I have found that this particular paradigm, which pulls together three big theories, has been the most helpful. And the key parts to that are the maturation key. In other words, children are in a process of development. They're constantly developing. It takes a long time. It's a long process. And so we need to respect that process. And we'll see when we look today at alarm, anxiety, and attention problems, just where maturation fits in there and why that can be a problem. The reality here, though, is in order to grow, you have to be soft, but to be soft, you're going to be vulnerable. And tolerating vulnerability is very difficult for us as human beings, something that perhaps we have learned most about during this time of pandemic, how vulnerable we all feel and how hard it is to tolerate that vulnerability. And how do we as humans, but especially children, how are they able to tolerate that vulnerability, which allows them to be soft, that softness which moves them to vulnerability? Well, that is through a safe and secure attachment with a caring adult. When the child can rest in our care, then they can be soft, then they can mature. And so this is the way that I look at what is going on. And of course, this is backed by neuroscience, by developmental science, and now by about our understanding of trauma. And this is just the question, why do so many students have a hard time staying still, paying attention, staying on task? Why are some of them so anxious and agitated? Well, we of course now know that the conditions that we're living in through the pandemic have made that brought that particularly to the fore, but this was true before the pandemic was here. And we seem to sense that there's more and more of this. And so what we basically are looking for, what do we see? We see all sorts of behaviors, jitteriness, obsessive behaviors, difficulty sleeping, phobias, difficulty learning, fear of making mistakes, restlessness, trouble focusing, acting out, scattered attention, prone to panic, lots of worrying. All of these things are there, but this is what we see. But what's underneath it? Well, underneath it is basically our alarm system. It's an activated alarm system that provide these systems. And very briefly, our alarm system is in our in the center part of our brain. Its job is to ensure our survival. And we'll see very shortly that for humans, the actual drive, the survival drive, is actually towards attachment. But let's just look at what's going on inside of the brain here. What we do is we have three major parts of the brain that are involved in this. We have the amygdala, which is like our smoke detector. It notes a threat. And some people have very active smoke detectors. They go off very, very quickly. Others have, sort of more lackadaisical ones. But every one of us, whenever there's a danger, our amygdala will kick in. The hypothalamus activates the response. So it engages the sympathetic nervous system and makes it possible for us to do what we need to do to be able to ensure our survival. And then our hippocampus remembers what it is that threatens us. The hippocampus has another job in terms of memory. It also moves what we've learned in our short-term memory or our working memory into our long-term memory. The only problem is when the hippocampus is preoccupied with survival, then it affects the other memory functions that we have. And I think, again, many of you have been maybe experiencing that. It's just been harder for you to remember what you have to do because we have so many other things that we have to remember that in order to keep ourselves safe and healthy. And the sympathetic nervous system, basically there's cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, growth hormone. These are all there to be able to move us to. And basically these are the underpinnings of emotion to move us to be able to do what we have to do just to stay alive. The blood vessels constrict, we have a different increase in heart rate, blood diverts to the muscles, and we have trouble with rest and digest. So these are emotion. These are the movement of emotion, and they are meant to go up and down, up and down. The trouble is when they stay in our system too long, they do affect us, and some of us have had that effect. We've realized that as we go through this time of pandemic, when we just haven't got those down periods, that we are affected. We're not functioning as well as we can. So it's important that these things move through us, but they can't always. And so our alarm system is basically, when our survival is at stake, is activated. So arousal and attention are highly involved. We pay attention to what it is that can cause us difficulty. If any of you have ever waited, let's say, up for a teen in the evening, it's their curfew at 11 o'clock and they aren't coming and it's 11:30 and it's 11:45. Well, you can't even read your book. You can't even watch your TV show. Now you are just listening for that car, listening for the signs that they've come home. When we are worried about survival then or attachments or whatever it is that we're alarmed about, that's where our focus goes. Alarm is given the high priority, emotions are activated. Now we have to pay attention to what is threatening us and what could save us. And usually with alarm, there's a certain amount of caution or flight that happens. We want to kind of pull back and stay safe, but the system is quite broadly activated, and it can also move us to acting out and to doing other things. Now, what we need to understand is what for us as humans alarms us the most. And that is facing separation, not necessarily the actual separation from, although if we lose someone close to us, that is very distressing, but really experiencing or facing the lack or loss of closeness to those to whom we are attached. And what is one of the key factors in our pandemic right now is that we can't be close to the people we want to be close to, and we might actually tentatively or possibly lose them. We also, according to Dr. Neufeld, in as much reading that he has done around attachment, has realized that we attach as humans in a number of different ways. These are like roots, and the deeper the roots go, the stronger we are, the more robust we are, because when our roots are deep, then the plant can grow. And as humans, growth and development is part of what we do. And we attach in a number of different ways. We attach through our senses. We attach through a feeling of sameness. We attach through a sense of belonging and loyalty, which is really the level of trust. And by the way, as those of you that are working in education, when you are teaching children, they need to attach to you at this third level, because they need to trust that even though you're leading them into the vulnerable territory of learning, that you will keep them safe and you're going to make sure that they will succeed. Now, as attachment goes deeper, we now enter into what we call the paradox of attachment, because now we we need to be significant. Belonging and loyalty, by the way, is the level at which children become very jealous. But how do children tolerate that, basically sharing their teacher or their educational assistant or their aide with somebody else? Well, when they feel important, significant in a way that is different from the other children. And every one of you who are dealing with many children have little ways of showing a child how they are special to you. Of course, attachment is all about love and being loved. And then the final level of attachment is about being known, which means that we have someone in our life who can love us just the way we are, even with our weaknesses. So what this means here is that it's possible and likely that as human beings, we are going to experience attachment alarm on many levels. So the first threat, of course, of not being able to be with those of you that are working with pre-K and K and even grade 1, just the act of the child having to leave mommy and daddy behind can be, cause some certain amount of alarm. But because attachment can go deeper, of course, there are other ways in which we can stay attached. But not being the same as, I just heard of a case of a little girl, a teenager who lost all her hair. Huge alarm for her going back into class. Are people going to, are they going to are they going to laugh at me because I don't look the same as they do? And it's really hard when we are different. And that causes attachment alarm. Not belonging, not feeling that we are part of something, not mattering, not feeling loved, and not being known. These are all ways in which as human beings, we can feel this attachment alarm. And there are many experiences of separation, as we know, not being cared for, wanted, or liked by those to whom we are attached, our parents not being present either physically or emotionally, shuffling between parents, being removed from the home, foster care, adoption. I always alert those of you that are working with children to be aware of the ones who are in foster care, the ones who have had late adoptions in their lives, because they experience a lot of separation alarm. Even the arrival of a sibling, even just going to sleep at night, adults not being happy with us. We're all sensitive to that look of a displeasure on the face of another. Even those of you that have been married for many years, and I've been married for over 40 years to a wonderful, wonderful man, but I don't like it when he's not happy with me. It evokes my separation alarm. And then, of course, the realization that bad things can happen to those to whom we are attached, which is one of the things that we're facing right now. Separation alarm is part of the human condition. There is no way of avoiding it. And when people say, oh, all of our children are so anxious and alarmed, well, some of that is just normal. Some of that is just the way it is. But unfortunately, there are some things that seem to make it worse. So just to make a little bit of a distinction between some of the words that we use, which I guess we actually have to be a little bit sensitive to. Emotion is the actual experience of the alarm. So in other words, it's the adrenaline, cortisol, heart rate, blood pressure that we feel. That's an emotion. That's a natural, spontaneous, it just happens. But in order for it to become a feeling, it actually has to rise into consciousness. And the feeling that comes, or the words that come with the word alarm, is I'm scared. And so basically, when we are frightened, when we are in a state of alarm, then the words "I'm scared" come about. Now, anxiety is very closely related to alarm. Anxiety basically is just that one little bit, we're a little bit separated from the true source of the alarm that we are, the alarm and the separation that we're actually facing. It's alarm without eyes. And how does it manifest itself? Well, the child who says, I'm scared that mommy and daddy won't love me anymore. I'm scared that, basically these are it, or that my teacher won't love me, or that you won't take care of me, or that you're going to send me away. I'm scared. I'm scared. That actually is not anxiety. That is alarm, because they're feeling their alarm of the threat of possible separation. But when they constantly ask, oh, did I do this right? How is this? Do you like this? That is experiencing the alarm, but not talking about the separation. Again, there's nothing horribly wrong with all of this, but it's just one layer down. So basically, it just is something, it's sort of part of the way that our brain works. Now, why don't we make that connection? Because our brain protects us from seeing that would make us feel too vulnerable or too wounded. And we are seeing some of that around the pandemic. We see people who are denying that there is a virus that is circulating. not because they don't know that it's circulating, but because for them to actually acknowledge that would might make them feel too vulnerable. So their brain actually kind of denies it. So what happens here is the brain puts on a layer of protection, the feeling goes away, and now we start to see behavior, fears, monsters, obsessions, compulsions, avoidance, hiding. These are all things that come, and we often call these anxiety. These are linked with anxiety. And signs of it is they can't talk about being scared. And of course, that energy, it gets channeled into other things, obsessions, fears, compulsions, the need to do certain things, some nightmares, restlessness, hyperactivity. These are all things that we see. And of course, what comes with that is a desire to reduce that alarm. And so a lot of sucking and chewing and nail biting and eating, rocking, pacing, listening to music with a beat, all of these kinds of things, rubbing, twirling the hair, for some children, even rubbing their genitals. These are all ways in which they're trying to get that sympathetic nervous system deactivated a little bit. And of course, we seek comfort through transitional objects, stuffed animals, physical exertion, running, jumping, squirming. And of course, in adults and sometimes sadly in teens, we turn to drugs because they will soothe us. There's, again, nothing wrong with these things if they're done in an appropriate way, and they are helpful to get that sympathetic nervous system down. But these are just things that we naturally do turn to. Now, when alarm becomes overwhelming, our brain even protects us more. And now we have what we call the chemicals of alarm, but the feelings are numbed out. And so then there is the agitation is there, but there's no signs of being scared or of being afraid. And so that's kind of like the double layer. And we basically, now we start to see behaviors like agitation, hyperactivity, impulsivity, difficulty remembering directions, attention problems, difficulty staying on task, running away, hiding, resistance, without the overlying kind of sense of fear or worry. Anxiety, there's still fear and worry, but when we get to this next level, the child doesn't seem as distressed, and yet the behaviors are there. Often this is tied in with ADHD. Because what are some of the typical characteristics of ADHD? Distractibility, can't stay on task, can't complete their tasks, can't organize themselves, poor time management, motivation, moves all the time, can't get along with other, has certain academic deficits and difficulties. And so these are the behaviors that we see. Now, what I'm tying together here is suggesting, and this is what Dr. Neufeld suggests, is that some of the behaviors that we see that are associated with ADHD come from a basic sense of alarm, from a child who can't talk about what it is that is frightening to them. It kind of goes underground and it comes out in these behaviors. The other thing too is that attention, what are we paying attention to? What are we being distracted by? See, attention is a natural neutral mechanism, and it's affected by instinct, emotion, and intention. Now, if all is going well, we have a certain amount of control over it. All of you, if you're sitting in a room and someone's been talking for a while, and you find your mind drifting, you can say to yourself, "Oh no, I need to pay attention," and we bring ourselves back. But if we are full of emotion and alarm, it might be very hard for us to bring ourselves back, because our attention, if let's say your child is sick, our attention is on wondering if someone's going to call us, wondering if they're okay, wondering if it's time to call to see if they're okay. So that's the emotional aspect of attention that can distract or sideline our ability to pay attention. And it's a combination of tuning in and tuning out. What do we need to pay attention to? What can we tune out? As you know, in a classroom, there are many, many sounds and noises and things going on in the classroom. When the teacher is talking, we're expecting our children to tune into the teacher's voice. The children need to tune out the other children, need to tune out what's going on in the hallway, need to tune out what's going on outside of the window. So there's a fine capacity of tuning in and tuning out. And when all is going well in our emotional world, and then it's much easier for us to tune into what it is that we're supposed to be tuning into, particularly when it is around education and teaching. But when there's a natural bias to tune into what's wrong, competes with the defense to tune out what makes us feel vulnerable. So one of the things in education, one of the things that we need to understand about learning is that we are constantly asking children to do things that are hard for them to do. If they knew how to do it, we wouldn't have to teach it. But what's happening here is that the child has to engage In a learning activity, one in which they have to produce some kind of an output, and writing is one of the most classic examples of that, is that we have to basically look at when a child is writing, they have to look at the words that they're writing. Oh, is that the right way to spell it? Oh, is that the right way to space it? Do I have the capital and the period at the end? So there's all these kinds of things that I have to tune into and self-correct. But when we are numbed out or when we're sensing too vulnerable, our brain wants to tune that out. And that is one of the reasons why writing is one of the most difficult tasks for all of our children, but especially for our children who are experiencing too much alarm and too much vulnerability in their lives. Their brain is basically trying to tune them out from doing something that is actually hard for them to do. And so the attention scatters. And again, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have found this more difficult in the last few months for me to tune into things that I need to tune into. Something happens and poof, I'm off. I have to keep bringing myself back, because we are all in a heightened state of alarm right now. And our brain doesn't like that, but it also is aware of it. So when the attention is focused on trying to avoid more vulnerability, which would lead us to more alarm, or when there are other alarming stimuli like doors slamming or voices in the corridor, which again, when you are worried, you're going to be paying attention to, then the student is more easily distracted from the task at hand, fidgety, squirmy, pays attention to other stimuli, looks for distraction, looks for, from what that is, which is challenging, and as a result, has a hard time finishing tasks, and is often reluctant to engage in tasks that might be particularly difficult, and fatigues easily and seems to be unmotivated. Because one of the things we need to remember is there's a whole part of our brain, and I'll be talking about that in a moment, which is actually helps us to tune into things, to bring ourselves back. And when that part of the brain is overworked, it gets really tired. So it's the alarm focuses us somewhere else, and the brain has a hard time dealing with it. Some children, of course, have very high defenses. They have so much more emotion and so much less feeling that they actually can run away but not seem scared, can be silly and sassy, can say rude things without being angry or distressed. They will refuse to listen to adults. Some of them will destroy their schoolwork. And it's very hard for us to understand what's going on with these children, because they don't look alarmed, and yet there is huge amount of alarm there. And they often say things like, I don't care. Now, let's just look a little bit more into the brain, because we've looked into the limbic system. Now let's look into the higher part of our brain, which is supposed to be there to kind of modulate what's going on in terms of our limbic system. And we call these the executive functions, and they're supposed to be able to coordinate tasks and complete tasks. And so this helps us with self-awareness and impulse control. Our prefrontal cortex kind of basically says, no, sit still until the teacher's finished. So that part of the brain, it helps us with making pictures, with self-talk, with emotional regulation, self-motivation, planning and problem solving, expenditure of effort, time management, and responding to feedback and resistance to outside influence. So that prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain that kind of all work together are very, very essential for us to be able to manage ourselves in situations where the focus has to go on something that might not necessarily come from us. Now, when we're looking at ADHD, Russell Barkley, who's been studying this for many, many years, basically says that when we look at the prefrontal cortex of these children, they are basically delayed anywhere from 30 to 40%. So just very quickly, we have a 5-year-old child who's now more like a 4-year-old, or even more like a 3-year-old, or an 11-year-old who now is more like an 8-year-old, or more like a 7-year-old in terms of this ability to manage themselves, or a 15-year-old who is more like a 12-year-old or more like a 10-year-old. And any of you that are teaching these children who have either been diagnosed with ADHD or you suspect it, you know that, you see that, oh my goodness, he's so immature. And this is exactly what is going on. And that prefrontal cortex, first of all, it only starts to get connected between 5 to 7 years old, and it continues to change and develop until mid-20s. So it's a long way from full development. It fatigues easily, and development is slowed by stress or complex trauma. So And this is what some of the research has told us when they were looking at teenagers who had experienced physical abuse or emotional neglect. There was a decrease in the volume of the prefrontal cortex, and for males it was impulse control, and for females it was emotional regulation. And then there was another part of the brain that was also developing slowly. Now, again, some of you may say, well, I mean, not all of the children in my classroom who've been diagnosed with ADHD or with an attention problem have, difficult homes, and no, they don't. And there are many, many reasons. Some of it is the sensitivity of the child and so on and so forth. But you will definitely find most children who have experienced difficult home circumstances will have a diagnosis of ADHD, because definitely that part of their brain has been affected. Now, the good news is, from a developmental perspective, is that it can come back. The brain will continue to develop. It just needs certain conditions that we need to be very careful about, because remember, growth happens in rest. And so one of the things that we need to really work on is helping these children feel safe and at rest, so that that part of their brain can keep growing. But as you know, for some of these children, it is tough for them because they have difficulty. Russell Barkley has called ADHD a motivation deficit disorder, because they can't regulate their arousal and they have difficulty overriding their natural distaste for work. I mean, none of us likes to work, but we basically, our prefrontal cortex tells us, all right, settle down. You got to get it done. As much as you'd like to watch that TV show, or as much as you'd like to read that book, you got to get your work done right now. But when your prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, it doesn't have the capacity to do that for us. And therefore, the child looks unmotivated. Huge problems around time management and organization, because again, our prefrontal cortex allows us to see the big picture, but these kids just see the short picture. They don't see things coming. They don't plan or prepare. They often can't even remember the consequences of not getting something done. They act when the event is upon them, and it increases as they get older because the demands increase, and the mess builds up over time, and they just have so much difficulty juggling the difficult tasks. So this part of their brain that's supposed to help them is not there when they most need it. They also have difficulty getting along with other students because of their difficulty with impulse control, because they overreact often emotionally, because they have difficulty taking another's perspective. And again, our prefrontal cortex allows us to say, well, here, this is my need, this is the other child's need, but they can't do that as well. They don't see the impact of their actions on others. They often don't even see trouble coming, and they're surprised when others lose patience. They will tend to not take responsibility for their actions because, again, development comes with that. So basically what we're saying here is that these children have specific behavioral problems that are linked both to increased alarm that they're living and to the fact that their brain, possibly as a result of that increased alarm, is not developing as it should. The other thing we need to sort of think about a little bit as well is, why is this escalating alarm there over and beyond all of the normal challenges that we have in our daily lives? Right now, of course, as adults, we are all more alarmed, and our children are feeling that alarm. So even the ones who have generally been able to function quite well for the last year and a half, they have the alarm that is in the world is affecting them as well. And then unfortunately, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but unfortunately, some of the ways in which we try to manage challenging behavior actually increases alarm. Too much time out or isolation increases separation alarm. Consequences, especially for the immature, for a consequence, you need to actually be able to reflect and think through and hold it in your head for the next time. Many of these children can't do that. A reward system where we make attachment contingent upon good behavior increases alarm. And so these, unfortunately, some of these children, these particular ways of interacting with them have been used a lot. And instead of helping them, they've actually made it worse. And even for our good kids, for our kids who do well, they often, when these kinds of ways of intervening with them are used too much, they start getting into alarm because they're afraid they're not going to be good enough. So again, I'll talk a lot about what are things that we can do instead of using these particular interventions that can be helpful for a brain that is highly alarmed and a brain that is very immature. So what do they need from us? I'm just going to take a little sip here. Well, basically, they need us to reduce alarm by increasing attachment. really trying to remember that they need us more than anyone else. We also need to compensate for an immature brain by trying to provide the external structure that their brain is not ready yet to provide naturally. We're also going to recognize that when they are full of alarm, that there's all this extra adrenaline and cortisol and whatever running through their body. So we're going to find ways of helping increase opportunities for physical and emotional release. And so, yeah. And then we need to be patient with their development. We need to recognize and understand. And this is probably one of the biggest understandings that I have come to, both with Dr. Neufeld's work and Dr. Barkley's work, is that the prefrontal cortex and the brain continues to grow and develop. It just grows and develops at a slower rate. And no one intervention is going to magically fix that. This is something that we as the adults need to continue working at. And when I finally understood this, I would be very honest with parents of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD or have severe attention and focusing problems. I say to them, you are going to need to be their prefrontal cortex all the way through their academic career. And what we now at universities is happening is that they are providing coaches and tutors and a variety of other helping people that are helping children who have been, or students who have been diagnosed with ADHD, to help them get through university. Because as you know, a child who has ADHD is not a child who has intellectual problems. They just have all of these organizational problems that are coming from a very profound place. So with our unfocused student, interestingly enough, when they are in attachment with us, they are now going to be much more likely to pay attention to us. Attachment attracts attention. And so this is what we want to make sure, is that we cultivate a strong relationship so that when we start talking, our voice triggers an attachment response, which then triggers an attention response. But again, what's going to be hard is if a student, and this is one of the things even in our elementary schools, and in fact, more so in our elementary sometimes than in our high schools, when our students have 4, 5, even up to 6 different adults teaching them in the course of a day, if you're not, it's not possible for the child to always be in that good attachment relationship with every adult. So they might be able to focus for one teacher, but not necessarily for the others. Now, again, we talk a lot about engaging the attachment instincts, because when the attachment instincts are engaged, the child is more likely to listen to us. We call that, and any of you have heard me speak before, it's called collect before you direct. Get into the space, catch the eyes, get a smile, get a nod. And this is the challenge with these kids. I've been in classrooms observing some of these children where the teacher is being very nice, saying hello to all of the students, calling the class to order, and these little guys haven't heard her yet. It hasn't, triggered in their brain or registered in their brain that the teacher is now talking, that they need to pay attention to the teacher. And basically, the child often won't pay attention until it's too late. And so this is one of the things we have to figure out. Is there some way I can get the child or the children to look at me and smile? A lot of kindergarten teachers will start off by singing a song, or you can say a chant, even 1, 2, 3, look at me. And if children aren't looking, if you say 1, 2, 3, look at me, and the children haven't done that yet, especially our little ADHD kids, and they're likely not to, we might need to say it 2 or 3 times. Or if we need to call that child's name, to say it in an endearing way, because what we want is when the child looks up, for them to see our smiling face, which is our attachment face. And when they do look up and smile at us, then we know, oh, okay, now they are saying non-verbally, I'm here, I'm ready to listen, and now we can give our direction. We have some of our children, of course, the minute we give them seat work, things to do, they go off task. Now, for our K4s and K5s, honestly, we should be giving them as little as possible. But if you do, keep it short for all of the students. And if you have a little one whose focus wanders, redirect to keep getting them to finish one little part, fold the paper, highlight it, whatever. But for the most part, if they can't pay attention, allow them to go and play. And I know some of the other children will say, well, he's playing, why can't I? Well, he has finished his work. It's not their business what work he's finished. It's your business to decide what you think that particular child can handle. And I'm not going to talk a lot about play today, but as you know, for young children, play is where they grow and develop. And of course, with the little ones, read the activity. If they can't do it, just give more permission for more free play. Ultimately, insisting on completing an assignment is really not what is necessary for a young child's development. The more they can play, the more they're going to develop. At elementary level, of course, we do need to get them to do more things. But with these kids, we need to divide the work into small chunks. When the focus wanders, focus them on one small step, fold the paper, highlight what you want completed. I remember writing, as I mentioned, is particularly difficult for these children. I've often recommended to teachers, if they're writing in their journal and they start wandering off, just put a little X on the line and say, just write a few words for this line, just this line here, you know. And once it's a small manageable chunk, the alarm will stay down, the ability to focus will go up because, okay, it's done. And provide encouragement and support. Swing by that desk often and just let them know it's okay. Try the next one, try the next one. Prioritize the important work. As you know, sometimes you can just do one or two. What are the most important ones? And just accept the fact that a lot of work won't be completed. What's more important here is that a student gets a sense of accomplishment and senses that you value their efforts. One of the things we need to remember about these kids is that in order for them to focus, in order for them to please us, they are using their prefrontal cortex a lot. When you have to use your prefrontal cortex to get you to pay attention, you get exhausted. It fatigues easily. And many of these children have worked harder by 10 o'clock in the morning than most of the other children will work all day. How else could we help? Well, with writing assignments, they might need the computer. They might need a study carrel for removing distractions. You need to, if you've given 2 or 3 instructions, write them on the board, and maybe once you've seen all of the kids have done it, just erase them off so they know what's the next step, or maybe put a note on their desks, which are the things that they have to do. I know that's a lot of extra work, but it's easier than trying to keep a kid on task. Give them a little sign to help them kind of stay on task, something, a little something to let them know. When you use their name, try it with a smile in your voice and in your eyes. I have observed a lot in classrooms, and one of the things that breaks my heart when I think about it, of course, it took me a while to think it through, but there's a little book called Joey Picks a Swallowed a Key. So basically writing from the perspective of a child who has ADHD, and he said, every time I know the adults aren't happy with me, they're never happy with me, I never get it right. And I just thought, I often say, because I do teach classes to university students who are studying to be teachers, and I say, when you are in a school, on one of your practicums, and you have a little bit of time to observe, pick a kid like Billy or Kevin, the ones that are hard to grasp their attention, and look at the adult's face. And it's true. I mean, I don't fault you at all. I'm not a very patient person at all. But when we go, Billy, 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 well, by the time we get to the third Billy, this is not an attachment face. These kids often throughout the course of their day rarely see adults who are happy to see them. And so I often say, I was sort of little running joke is, what would you need to do to graduate from Eva's teacher education school? Well, one of the things that you would need to do is to be able to act pleased even when you're not. Because when Billy looks up and he's finally got that, oh, my teacher wants me, and he's so happy. And again, I know that they don't look happy because often they look up and they see our frustrated face and then away they go. But if we looked, Billy, wow. Because the reality is, by the time these students hear your voice, you're likely to be a bit frustrated. And some of these children only ever see a frustrated adult face. And therefore, it's that much harder for them to attach and to attend to us. So hopefully, if there's one little thing that you remember from today, this will be one of the things. With secondary, divide the work into small chunks. If you can, provide an assignment sheet that indicates what work has been completed and what needs to be done. And by the way, this is very helpful to parents or to parents who hire a tutor. I remember when my son, who was very high functioning, was in high school and he asked me to help him with an assignment. And I said, well, what does your teacher want you to do? He said, well, I don't know. And for some reason he hadn't taken proper notes. We can't count on our kids to be able to bring home or know what they need to do. So if you can print up a paper that says this is what needs to be done, Obviously, provide encouragement and support, prioritize the important work, maybe assign a study partner. That doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And again, accept that much work won't be completed, but try and focus on what is essential to be completed. And by the way, have backup copies of assignment sheets, because these children lose them time after time. So just give them yet another one, yet another one. And I know one of the frustrations people say, well, how are they going to develop a sense of responsibility if we keep giving them things? But you know what? If a child doesn't have an assignment sheet, they aren't going to know what's being done, and then they really aren't going to get it done. Since the assignment is important to us, I think it is up to us to give them the structure and support that they need. And again, for some of you, I know that I'm getting older in age, and when you get older in age, you get a little bit more distracted and a little bit harder to focus. And right now, because of the pandemic, I'm living with my 40-year-old daughter, who is very organized. And it's amazing how, especially when we have to entertain together and get things done together, I'm a last minute person and she hates last minute. Well, she has structured me. Mom, on Wednesday, this is what we need to get done. And on Thursday, this is what we need to get done. And there's a little part of me that sort of says, well, I'm the mother and you're the child. But there's a little part of me that says, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for helping me what I need to get done on Wednesday. And thank you for helping me know what I need to get done on Thursday. And I'm not yet at that stage in my life where she has to run my life, but I really appreciate the structure that she has provided for me. Now, some of our students are agitated. First of all, we need to see the alarm even though they don't look scared. We need to remember they don't look alarmed, but the agitation comes from alarm that is defended against. And they're the hardest to help because they don't look like they need us, but they actually do. These are the kids that need more attachment, not less. Provide them with an environment that is necessary for their level of functioning. We need to tolerate movement, provide acceptable fidget items, provide elbow room, an active corner, give them active jobs, and a brain break. So very quickly, fidget items, weighted items, all of these things help with alarm. Different workstations, different ways of seating, standing, sitting, on the floor, whatever. Different seating options. Again, none of these will solve the problem of ADHD or lack of focus, but for some kids, just being able to wiggle back and forth is helpful for them, and so give them, if you have the resources to provide some of these options for them, allow them to do that. Might have to set up a designated area in the classroom. I tried to find one for secondary, kind of like a carrel. For elementary, some place where the kids can go when things are too much for them. It benefits the student, the group, and the teacher, and you need to adapt it. Now, one of the things I want to alert you to here is that in the PDF that I sent you, you see here at the bottom, it says www.cebmmember.ca cocoon area, and I'll give you the password for the CEBM member area. If you click on that link in your PDF, it should bring you to a page on our website that describes how to set these areas up. Movement stations, it's another possibility for a kid. Just like there's this poster that you can put up and the child can go to that section and do some movement and do some activity, hopefully therefore not disturbing the other children, but getting out some of that excess energy. Brain breaks, where we put these breaks into the classroom, and I recommend during the pandemic to do this often. Research has shown that brain breaks improve staying on task, increase attentiveness, and restore energy and motivation. Again, we have a wonderful section on our website that walks you all the way through brain breaks, mostly at the elementary level, but this would be also applicable to early secondary. Kinetic pathway and movement stations. Some of our kids need a break. Rather than the olden days, you'd say, go get a drink of water. Well, now many of our schools have one of these kind of kinesthetic pathways, and the child could go out for 2 or 3 minutes, take advantage of that, and then come back into the classroom. And again, emotion and play, very, very important for emotional release. Dance party, paper snowball fights, clapping games, pool noodle drumming, Simon Says, stomp dancing, pretending emotion, pretending to be animals, playing monster games. Be as creative as you can, because our children do also need to release emotion. And of course, if you have the luxury of being able to take children outdoors, get them outdoors. And I know we now have 2 recesses here in Quebec, and so it's a wonderful thing. This is very, very helpful. The more children play outside, the calmer their whole system is. In order to decrease alarm, we have to help the student to believe that we will continue to help and support them despite their shortcomings. For our children with attention and focus problems, they are always getting into trouble. And we need to constantly reassure them. It's been tough for you today. You tried really hard. It didn't work out. I'll figure out a way to help you tomorrow. If we've had to send them out, we need to bridge the separations. And we need, again, as I mentioned, to reconsider the use of behavior charts, a behavior report at the end of the day. So obviously, sometimes these kids need to leave the classroom. Sometimes there need to be a separation, but let's send them to someone. First of all, know when you're kind of losing it with this child, and see if you can, either send them to the designated area in the classroom so that they're not driving you and the other kids quite so crazy, and maybe go to that movement station. Or if, again, you're seeing them wind up and they're starting to circle around the classroom and disturb the other children, you might just actually need to get them out of the classroom by sending them, with a book or an envelope to the behavior technician, to the secretary, if you have a nurturing support center in your school. And then just let them know when they come back or before the end of the day, oh, we'll see you tomorrow, so that the child doesn't feel that they're being rejected, but that we're actually giving both what they need and what you need. Because as a teacher, sometimes you need to have a little bit of peace in your classroom. But this using time away is not as rejecting. These practices, the behavior chart, the next session that I'm going to be doing on the 4th of November, I'll go into this in more depth. But the bottom line, as you know, is that after the month of September, it's always the same ones that are going to end up in the orange and the red. And, if they could change their behavior, they would. We now know that their behavior comes from immaturity and emotional needs. That's not going to be corrected by a behavior chart. And it can cause shame or alarm. And also, so we need to now, after the month of September, say, all right, who are the guys that can't hang in there in the green? What are we going to do to help them? What are we going to do differently to help them? Same with the agenda at the end of the day, and there's a link at the bottom of this. It's very disappointing, very hard for a child to bring the disappointment home. I didn't have a good day. The parents disappointed. They're trying to fix the kid overnight. Everyone's frustrated. They come back, and even our good kids get scared. I can't have a green day today. So, we just really doing that is not very, very helpful. Again, there's an article, and bottom line is, again, if a child is chronically having problems, we need to find another way to communicate with the parents. Minimize the influence of peers. These kinds of kids have a really hard time doing well when they're with the other children. So we have to expect poor behavior when they spend unsupervised times with peers. They just aren't going to get it right. And so we need to just, understand they're going to make mistakes. If we can, is there some way of having them spend time in the presence of those more mature? Now, in the olden days before COVID, we were able to put a grade 2 with a grade 6. I don't know if we can do that right now. So therefore, sometimes we have to actually put them with adults. And so we need to find a dignified way of, keeping them kind of away from the other kids, but supervised by an adult. And of course, building this village of attachment, surrounding the child with as many caring adults as possible, creating strong adults to all the different. If you have a substitute teacher coming in, talk about that substitute teacher, make an effort, speak to the child even before, tomorrow there's good, if you know who the substitute is, and I know right now you're probably having a hard time, but Mr. Smith is going to be coming in tomorrow to replace me. Do you remember Mr. Smith? Oh, Mr. Smith told me that he noticed you last time and he thinks you have a lot of spunk, and just basically build that relationship with that person. And then again, create positive relationships with the parents. Try and do positive phone calls and notes home. These kids are constantly, all their career, when they started in daycare, the parents are just used to getting the little red faces, the little negative notes. Let the parents know, yeah, it might be difficult, but we're going to work on it, and welcome them even if there's trouble. And as I say, don't use that agenda for communicating with the parents. With these challenging behaviors, manage the situation. Don't expect any one intervention is going to correct or fix the student. Protect that precious adult relationship. If you can, provide more playtime, because that's how the brain really grows and develops. The only cure for a student who's full of alarm is lots of time, lots of attachment, and lots of patience. What do they need from us? Unconditional attachment. They should not have to work for to please us. It's only in rest that they will grow. So remember to have a smile in your eyes when they finally look at you, and provide more attachment when the behavior is at its worst. This is the key to getting those kids to want to pay attention to us. Put the emphasis on togetherness and relationship, bridge the separations, welcome the student each day with warmth, even though maybe you're even, dreading it a little bit. Be the one to restore the relationship. It was a difficult day yesterday. We're going to try again today. Let them know we're here. We're going to take care of them. And by the way, right now, this is a message all of our children need to hear, because when the world is not safe, what keeps them safe is adults who keep saying, we're going to figure things out. It's not the way we expected, but we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. And when children look to adults for reassurance, their alarm goes down. This is our website. We have a section for members, and the password for that is CEBM members. Uh, all sorts of ideas and resources for things that you can do. As I say, I gave you a few links where you can go and listen to recordings and find articles and read more about some of the things that I had to say to you today. So I thank you very much for your participation, and I will have a few moments for questions. I'll be giving you a link for an evaluation and feedback form. If you could just download that, please, and fill it in, we'd really appreciate it. And our next session, November the 4th from 4 to 5 p.m. on managing behavior without rewards. And I know that quite a few of you have already signed up for that. So before I answer questions, I am just very quickly going to put in, I hope, there's the evaluation form. And so it just takes about 2 minutes to fill it out. It just helps us with the ministry. So let me see the questions. All right. So can you speak to the presentation of children as manipulatives and how we can explain this presentation to school staff within the context of anxiety and ADHD? But this is, I think you're putting your finger on something that is really key here. Those children that are very defended against alarm can look really like they're trying to manipulate us. You can't tell me what to do. I don't really feel like doing that. And it is very hard, because that for us as adults, the hardest thing for us is to take a kid who says, I don't feel like doing that. But when we just have to say, there's something going on. You might not want to use the word alarm, because the teacher, he has nothing to be alarmed about. He comes, his family's fine and or whatever. You can just say, I think he's trying to tell me something with his behavior. And any of you that have seen some of my other presentations know that I very often put that little Calvin and Hobbes cartoon in, where he basically says, I hate you, go away from you, and nobody recognizes my hints to smother me with affection. So I think basically you just need to say to the other staff, I think he's trying to tell us something with his behavior. I'm going to try and find a way to help him to get done what he has to do, and just be confident in what you're doing and just keep doing it. What age would K4, K5 be? Those are our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds. Yes, yes, somebody said all these strategies are helpful for all students. Absolutely. And, more and more what we're finding is that strategies that are helpful for children with behavior problems, children with attention problems, children on the autism spectrum are also helpful for all of the children in our classrooms. They don't take away from what we can do in our classrooms, maybe a little bit, because we maybe like to have things a little bit more free and open. But for a lot of the kids, especially in this day and age, structure and predictability is very, very helpful to them. If you have an occupational therapist in your school, absolutely, they're very, very good at helping to figure out what would work for a child. Yep, movement break for everybody. Thank you, Heather. All right, I don't see any more questions here. So I don't know if anybody has another question. I have 5 minutes to answer it, if you have something that comes to your mind. I do realize that it is late and most of you are probably having difficulty attending because your attention has been taken possibly by all of the other things that you need to do. Now let me just, oh, someone's writing something good. So we'll be patient with you, Megan. Oh, thank you for the feedback, Maria. I appreciate that. Yeah, the thing we need to recognize, of course, is that all of the adults in our schools now are filled with alarm, and so, and especially some of them feeling the pressure of having to get kids through a curriculum. It's quite a challenging situation that we have right now. Um, oh, the lunch ladies or the recess supervisors, really, just one little trick that I would have is notice the kids that are constantly getting into trouble and find a little tiny way to connect with them. Something about if you need help carrying something, go to one of those kids, find a way to create a relationship with them that before they get into trouble. So, oh, I need a boy to help me, or I need a big girl to help me carry this. Find some way of doing that. But it's challenging because you have so many children in your care. The other one is just expect there's going to be trouble. Children can't behave all the time. They are going to make mistakes. And at the end of the session, especially if you've had one that is kind of icky, kind of not too sure, just before they leave, and I've had kids say to me how much they appreciate it. Just go up to that kid and say, "Oh, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow." You're looking forward to seeing me? And the kid knows. A lot of kids know after they've done something, they realize they've done it wrong. But you know what? If you just say to the kid, "I'm looking forward to seeing that smile tomorrow," is amazing the difference that will make. Rather than trying to correct the behavior, actually correct the relationship. What do we do when a student become overjealous and upset when they see the attachment with other students that have with me? Oh, yes, that's because if they're stuck at that third level of attachment, again, find a little thing that's special about that kid that you can do. I always say to people, though, if a student is jealous of your attachment with other children, at least they're attached to you at the third level of attachment. They can't get jealous until they're that attached at that third level. And so we need to bring them to the fourth level. Oh yeah, but you're my hockey player, or you're the one I'm counting on for telling me about, the baseball scores, or you find something significant about that student that then makes them special from the other students. Yeah. So, let me just see. I have something in the Q&A. What type of communication is best to inform the parents without discouraging the child? If we don't use a behavior chart, what else? Oh, one of my favorite ones right now. And again, you'd have to have met with the parent before this. But honestly, if a child has had a particularly difficult day at school, I would write in the agenda is he needs a lot of TLC tonight. Because, if I've had a difficult day, what do I want my husband to do? I don't want my husband to ask me what I did wrong and what I thought I could do better. I want my husband to put the pizza in the oven, to make me a cup of tea or get me a glass of wine, and to make sure that the TV show that I love watching is queued up and ready to go. The harder my day is, the more I need someone to take care of me. And then that can be a kind of a back and forth cue, and the parent might want to write to you later in the evening or whatever and say, "What happened today?" But when a child has a difficult day, they are overwhelmed, and they need more rest, not less rest. Um, Okay, so the last one, and I'm just going to cover this, is can you explain the expression alarm is defended against? We now have come to the understanding, and Bessel van der Kolk has looked at the human brain. We all know that when have experienced a very difficult situation, sometimes we can't remember. If any of you have ever been in a car accident, okay, and car accidents are usually pretty dramatic and pretty noisy, and someone will say to you, do you remember what happened just before the accident happened? Some of you can remember, and some of you go, I don't know. It came out of nowhere. When you watch the video of what happened in the accident, you realize it didn't come out of nowhere. But our brain, when we're overwhelmed, our brain actually shuts down our ability to remember things, shuts down. Again, I mentioned around the pandemic, there are people who are basically tell us, I'm not scared. I'm not going to get the virus. And it's because their brain basically says, I can't handle the alarm of worrying about getting sick. And then the rest of us who can feel that alarm, I don't know about you, but I am exhausted. There are times when again, I don't know how you do it all day wearing masks. But so when a brain defends, it allows us to deal with a difficult situation. Another little example is, again, if your child is sick, and you go to work, and you've got people taking care of them. You get through the day. You haven't even thought you haven't thought a lot about your child, or you haven't let your worries kind of overwhelm you. That's your brain defending yourself. It's not a conscious thing. It's actually, and at the end of the day, how did I get through the day? Well, because your brain basically said, I'm not going to let you worry about that right now. And then at the end of the day, all of a sudden, and your friend might say, oh, how is your daughter doing? And then, maybe you even start crying, and all of a sudden the feelings come back. So defenses are a way that we can get through difficult situations. But when we get stuck in defenses, then we get into trouble. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, everyone. Once again, I'm going to just put in the evaluation form. If you could just click on it or copy it, or find a way to download it, just please take the 2 minutes, give us some feedback. And I look forward to seeing some of you on the 4th of November. We have a whole list of other sessions that will be offered through the course of the year. Thank you very, very much. And if you want to share the recording with any of your colleagues, family, friends, whoever, they will be posted on our website probably by next Monday. And yes, then you can go ahead and share that. So thank you very, very much, everyone, and look forward to having you participate in some of our other sessions.